can use that showcase to raise funds for the community. And like we providing international food for the staff. They have to pay certain amount of money to get the food, and then we like raise fund, and then we use that fund to do some community project. That linkage. And on that note, also when I was studying abroad, we it's true that we as a like minority, like as an international student, we hire ourselves. But at the same time, we can we not only can do much more, we can jump out of comfort zone, such as what we have done. Like we participated at different volunteer project. We asked the local community to donate some new stuff, and then we provide a yard sale. And the yard sale, we had cultural showcase, we had dance, we had singing out songs from our country. I think those things we can think about how can we not only at the university level we can do something more or do beyond our university level. Another thing is the different department and also the collaboration. Like we have heard wonderful things from different center and department they are doing. I wonder if the collaboration and the communication among these, and how can we work together and
Great, thanks. So two ideas there. One is expanding the notion of the cultural showcase and engaging much more with the communities, two-way process, maybe some fundraising activities, and also developing the kind of activities that we can undertake with the communities, and also improving the dialogues across departments and across faculties as to get some coordination in the kind of work that we're doing. Okay, is that a fair summary? Yeah, thank you. Carla?
Okay, I also have two comments.
Right.
So the first one is that, and it's not just today, but it's whenever we talk, or whenever I've heard people talk about ethnic minorities, we're not really talking about ethnic minorities. We're talking only about visible minorities. And that's not necessarily accurate. So China has
55 ethnic minorities.
Ethnic minorities. They look very similar to, the main Han Chinese population, ethnic population. They have different languages, different cultures, different religions. And so we're not talking about those people. And so we could be doing a very big disservice to Chinese citizens who are ethnic minorities. So we should be talking about all ethnic minorities, not just visible minorities, because they could have very different needs than just visible minorities as well. And probably we don't even have a huge amount of data on those students, or we don't even know if they're, if they are an ethnic minority, who knows. So I think that that's one thing, that we should really broaden our conceptualization of what an ethnic minority person is. Yeah. The other thing is about the CMI, EMI streams, and this is some feedback that I've gotten from my students. Obviously, I do EMI only, but some of my students have said that their other lecturers are allowing them to write their final assignments in Chinese, for example, because their English ability is not so great. Then, of course, they come into my classroom, and they're, now what should I do? I can't read Chinese. I certainly can't speak it. So if their hearing or listening and speaking isn't great, they can be at a disadvantage. And also they must write their final assignments in English because, I can't mark something that I can't read. So I think that there has to be CMI is CMI, EMI is EMI, and lecturers should be forced to stick with that. Because it's not fair for ethnic minorities who are in the class. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So include less visible minorities in our ambit, and also make sure that EMI is EMI. Yeah, EMI means EMI. Okay, Shahid, and then Junzhou.
Well, there is no doubt we need to do a lot on campus in terms of facilitating students, current students, both in terms of the curricular and co-curricular activities of facilitation, in terms of teaching and non-teaching activities. But at the same time, if we're talking about improving the number of participation or the number of students from non-Chinese background at tertiary level, we need to think of various other factors which are related to their access to a university level. For instance, before coming to university, and then definitely when he comes to university, he's coming or she's coming to university because of future prospects. Not only focusing on campus teaching, non-teaching, facilitation and support, we need to think of those areas where one should be motivated to come to university and then pursue his career somewhere. So one of the examples you already talked about is multicultural teaching assistants. This is a kind of prospect once someone is graduated from the university. But personal anecdotal experiences such as that. Many students, though there are many reasons, are not coming to the university. But those who are capable of coming to university do not attend university because they don't see any benefit of that degree or certificate once they are graduated. So in terms of employment or in other professional development areas. So this is one of the areas we need to think of beyond the university. And then before coming to the university, of course, at secondary level, how we can approach those potential students and look for their needs in order to help them come to the university. No doubt, language is one of the possible areas we can support, but this is not the only area we can support them. Encourage them to the university or pursue the university degree. So I think we have to look into these areas as well. Just not coming to the university students, but also those who are potential applicants to come to university and looking at how we can engage or use for the future prospects.
Thank you. So 2 points there. One is maybe engaging with prospective employers more as well, so that we have opportunities opening up, that this is not the end of the story, that there is an outlet for people's talents once they graduate and there are employment opportunities. And also for us to get into the schools to identify those talents and help them to access the university and make sure that we cater for their needs as well. So, okay. Thank you. Hey, Junzhou.
I come from another faculty, FLUS, and I think 2 weeks ago, our acting dean sent a public message to everyone in our faculty and asked what we can do to try to help ethnic minority students. So I thought about it very carefully, what we can do. And I am here for 7 years, I think, in the teaching position. And obviously, it's very clear that students become much more diversified compared to the 12 years ago. It's not in terms of ethnicity, but also in terms of a lot of students have the ethnic. For example, in this semester, in my class, there is a student who is totally blind. He cannot see anything. So as a teacher, I have to think about what I can do and try to have more reflections, how to make my class or teaching more inclusive. Maybe I'm Chinese, maybe I'm going to make some changes and in the teaching. Anyway, and so I thought about my acting dean's question, and I think maybe a lot of things I can still do as problem can be solved at the class level by the individual tutors. So could be that's our achievements. That's something very good about our university. But I encountered one instance this semester, and it's a course for U1 students. We have a lot of students become much more diversified. A lot of them come from mainland China, and a lot of them come from other countries, Kazakhstan and Myanmar, and we're gonna have each year we're gonna have student representatives. Could be one program, could be 2 or 3 students, and they try to collect opinions, comments from the fellow classmates, and talk to the dean. I'm not sure they talk to other kind of offices. And one boy, he comes from the Kazakhstan, and he's a very active boy actually. He wants to do something for the whole program, and he told me he wants to be student representative, but some office told him you can't because you can't speak Cantonese. I do think that's in the university we should have students, maybe non-Chinese students, to have some basic Cantonese or Chinese. We should have them in order to try to adapt to the life after their graduation. But language shouldn't become the obstacle for their developments. But I don't know whether this kind of policy comes from. And finally, I talked to the program office, talked to the program leader, and we say, well, cannot do it. And just because, especially I think in that program, in that group, they have 40 students, almost 1/3 come from non-Chinese backgrounds. So I'm thinking about whether, regarding to the representative, do we need to have a counter, especially for this kind of diverse backgrounds, the students from diverse backgrounds, but also ask myself whether it's just, and so I just some experience and to share here.
Yeah, thank you. So the issue of making sure adequate representation of their voices through the system. There shouldn't be any systemic barriers to stop their voices being heard and representation and so on.
They're very powerful, actually, student representatives.
Yes.
You can talk to the dean and talk to a lot of other offices. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Can we go to Samara?
Actually, I would like to add on to the medium of the instruction from a student's perspective. I'll try not to offend anybody because we have lectures.
Go ahead. Don't hold back.
It's honestly very, very frustrating. Like, if I'm being honest, I'm paying equal amount of tuition fee, sitting in an stated English medium class to attend lectures of 3 hours in complete Cantonese. It's very, very frustrating and it's not fair. And then I cannot skip class because I need to keep my attendance. So how is it fair for a student like me who's trying to explore my abilities and try to expand my knowledge to be in a classroom with such unfair culture? Like, I really hope that if it's stated as it's an English class, to state as an English class. Communication within the classmates is absolutely no problem. I think everybody has a freedom of right to express themselves in the language they are more comfortable with and confident with. But as a lecturer or as a guest speaker, I think they need to be well aware of the classroom diversity. Just because I'm the only one out of all of my classmates does not mean that I can be in the shadows.
Yeah.
So I really hope that the faculty can work on it because I'll be very honest. If anybody asks me right now, my friends, if they ask me how is it going, or how is it in edu, I'll honestly tell them don't go there. It's my very, very honest opinion because I'm sitting there after a long day of work, trying to understand and translate back to some key or important issues back in English for myself so that I can understand what's going on. So if my friend comes up to me, oh, your course seems interesting, should I go for it? I honestly said no to one of my friends because I'm having a very hard time. And it's not just that, even the class projects. So I have to sit down for 3 hours of class of presentation, all completely done in Cantonese because said classmates' English level is not as good as mine. That's not a fair excuse. I mean, I did brought it up to the program head, and they told me that they are working on it, and it's a transition program this year. So I don't really know what to do because I'm apart from that misfortunate experience, I'm really enjoying everything that is happening. But at the same time, I feel like, am I really going to encourage my fellow friends, especially coming from a background, to come in and suffer. I honestly feel like it's suffering. After a hard day of work, I'm sitting here going through presentations that I don't understand. So I really, really hope that if you can help us to voice out this, because it's definitely not fair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we need to highlight this, and this is not a systemic problem. This is an implementation problem, because the president has made it very clear: EMI means EMI, CMI means CMI. So there is really nothing in the university policy which allows for the situation you've mentioned. So that the message needs to really be made loud and clear.
It's not probably about the policies or it's just about the culture of the classroom. And as I said before, fortunately, I speak and understand Cantonese. So, but that does not automatically means that the language can be changed because I'm the only one.
Yeah.
And it puts the burden on me to compromise because I'm the only one.
Yeah.
Perhaps if I had another non-Chinese with me, then the situation would have been different. But then it will go back to the point that everything is becoming limited for us as EM students.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Gloria.
Gloria, and maybe I want to introduce myself first. I'm the Equal Opportunities and Disability Access Officer, as introduced by Nathan in the very early morning. But she also introduced I'm under Human Resources Office. And so equal opportunities is part of my duty. And actually, I'm not sure if all of you have noted that. I'm sure that Ashi has noted we have organized some workshops on anti-discrimination ordinances, and also have internet special page on the Equal Opportunities Campus, and we have for policy-wise we have the Equal Opportunities policy and also the relevant diversity and equal opportunities statement on our page. But of course, this is the policy-wise. On the promotion, apart from something like some general anti-discrimination ordinance on the page, actually we have divided the categories on different nature, and one of them is the multicultural issue. And also, I'm thinking about the cultural sensitivity thing that we have mentioned in the earlier session. I'm thinking of arranging some activity, maybe some talk or video of our staff or students from different places of the world, and then we can put that some activity and also videotape that and put that on the internet page. This is some support that I have come with during the talk, and we may explore that, and we may have some cooperation with other departments as suggested by another friend here. Thank you. So please help promote equal opportunities and also the web page and also the activities.
Well, thank you for introducing your work. Now that'd be great if you could be a hub of activities and information and so on. That'd be a great support. Thank you. Miron. Sorry.
Just the point that Gloria just mentioned, because we were having one conversation during tea break. I think that would be really, really timely, because if you follow the latest policy address from the chief executive, I mentioned to you previously, like all the government department actually now going to put resource to go through all its stuff for cultural sensitivity training and that kind of stuff. So basically, as I said, probably it would be a good thing for us also to start thinking along that line, probably starting with some need analysis, whether people here working, they need it, and then we can go through, also look at government places, including Equal Opportunities Commission, what they are suggesting for all the stuff should be going through. And also, like one of the powerful sort of example Professor Hui mentioned, like bringing one of the students' example that like that student was sort of experiencing some cultural insensitivity issues from the third-party service providers here. So also something to think about, like all these third-party service providers who are like present on this campus, do they need to go through that kind of like mandatory sort of training, or at least some sensitization sort of training or something like that. So I think that would be really, really timely.
Can I raise a point which is, I think, underpinning a lot of the issues here, and that's one of language when we use labels. I think at the moment the English language is not well equipped to deal with the situation. We use words like minority, and we use a phrase like non-Chinese speakers, which are both quite negative in terms. And I know it's not quite the same in Cantonese, but in the mainland they've been battling with 少数民族. How can they translate that? And they're thinking, well, minorities is not a good word, and then they chose the word nationalities, but then they say, well, nationalities is politically incorrect. So they're having a debate as to how to translate the idea of minzu. So I think we need to think about a more positive way, because if we look in the communities, they're actually terrific funds of knowledge, there are great assets, there are major things that different groups can bring to Hong Kong, economically, socially, culturally, linguistically, and so on. But by giving them a negative label, we're actually closing the door on a lot of that. So I think there's a language problem that we could really need. Wang Li Xun's not here anymore, but we need the English department and the linguistics experts to think about a better way of describing the groups and the whole process, which is one of multiculturalism and multilingualism and so on, rather than saying, well, it's about assimilation or it's about trying to make do or to help them fit in. It's not that. It's this whole idea, I think as Shahid was saying earlier, that there's a great deal of education needed in Hong Kong society as a whole about being multicultural and being multilingual. That being multilingual is not just about Chinese and English because they're economically valuable languages. There are a whole range of languages which have got which contribute enormously to the culture of Hong Kong, and we need to begin to access and think in those terms. So if anybody's got any ideas on how we can improve the labelling, then that would be a contribution to making the whole situation a bit more positive. Benji.
Well, I don't have a direct answer for the label, but that was something I was thinking of too. So I'm Benji in the CNI department. I've been here for about 4 years now. And so I see this issue I was going to mention about this term of non-Chinese speaking, or there's a meeting actually called the Support Services for Non-Local Students. What does that mean? If you're not Chinese or you're not Cantonese, then you're not local. So my students attend this, and actually it's a bit frustrating because I get these minutes of meetings for the last few years. It's always the same stuff. And we're working on it, be patient, these things take time, and we definitely see a huge disconnect between policy and policy implementation that you also mentioned about. Maybe kind of connecting to some of the things that have been mentioned today, going beyond this kind of deficit thinking. It's like you don't have this, you don't have that, and it's almost like if you are linguistically or culturally the other or different, then it's a deficit. There's something wrong with you. It's seen as something that needs to be fixed, something that needs an accommodation, like you have a special education need or something like that. So that the nomenclature, the naming of it is problematic. So I think with what Min Tak was talking about in terms of the culturally responsive pedagogy, it sees that difference as something that we're building upon, not just acknowledging in a food or festivals kind of way, but actually acknowledging how those things have been present in Hong Kong for quite some time. It's part of that culture that we celebrate, but we just label it as Hong Kong, but we don't realize it's coming from South Asia, Southeast Asia. So changing that, but how do we do that within, I'm thinking about amongst our colleagues in the team that are teaching here. I don't know the best way, but what I do know is maybe for, sometimes there's like Miron was mentioning, it could be like in a diversity training, cultural sensitivity training, but if it's seen as still as an add-on, a supplement, like, oh, I have to do my 3 hours every 2 years, I gotta go in there, and then it doesn't really kind of mesh well. But I think we're very pragmatic at this university. So if we tie this into some of the ways we look at quality and achievement, that might be something. We have these teaching awards and things like that.
Performance appraisal.
Performance appraisal.
Some
dangerous. Yeah. There's, but I mean that could go in there. And also, like, we have this thing called the research assessment exercise. And typically, we, us faculty, are often judged upon our publications in these high-ranking journals and stuff. And now we're being asked to make impact on the local community and Hong Kong society. So it's a big shift on paper. So maybe one of the ways, this kind of lends itself nicely to going beyond the campus, doing some of the things that Shahid was talking about, and building these outreach, recruitment, retention programs, and research on that. And actually, a number of our colleagues now are starting to do research, ethnic minority research, because it's considered a funding priority now. But we can combine that practicality with like some ways to give these policies some teeth, to give it some standing on the ground. So I know I'm speaking broadly, but it's just a lot of things. I feel the frustration, but I also want to recognize the people that are working on it.
I mean, just to back up that point, I mean, I've been working in China on ethnic minority language issues and how, for example, in the Tibetan areas of Gansu, a one-teacher school manages to teach 3 languages. I mean, they're teaching Tibetan, they're teaching Putonghua, and they're teaching English in primary schools in the middle of the countryside. So how on earth does a single teacher with a multi-grade class handle this situation? Well, the answer is they can't. And what's happened is the government's put a lot of money into teacher education, teacher support, and so on. And they're looking for evidence-based policy making. And recently I was working in Qinghai province, where as a result of a couple of projects that they did in the Qinghai Nationalities University, the government funded a $1 million teaching resource and training centre on the basis of research. So there is a link that can be made between research and policy, and I think it would be a very powerful thing. And again, it's a question of coordination across departments, because I've found actually that there are little clusters of colleagues doing research in minority education, both in Hong Kong and in mainland China, but not really talking to each other. And I think, getting a critical mass would be quite an effective way ahead. Several people haven't had a chance to speak yet. I can see Jessie there has got. Is it Jessie or Jamie? Jamie, isn't it? If you anything you'd like to add to the discussion?
Actually, I'd just like to add on what Mr. Shahid has said, because more on the promotion of other programs in the university, I feel that because we're ethnic minorities, there's this thinking that we're only accepted for the English education program. So I wonder what the university has done in order to promote other programs. Like for me, I'm from psychology, but given that I'm the only non-Chinese student in my program, it makes me also feel a bit isolated.
Yeah.
So maybe the university could also do something to promote the other programs to show that the university is actually open into admitting more non-Chinese students for the other programs as well.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's a very important point. Thank you. Shahid.
Sorry to
No, carry on.
raise the hand again. Ace raise, you highlighted one of the things, what we should call these non-ethnic minorities or non-Chinese. So recently, one of the NGOs in Hong Kong, Zubin Foundation, conducted a project called Aish Hong Konger, so in which they identified majority of the participants, the non-Chinese, would like to identify being Hong Konger, but when it comes to their ethnicity, they prefer to call them as a hyphenated kind of identity, like Indian Hong Konger, Pakistani Hong Kong, or Nepali Hong Konger. So this is about their identification. But one more thing which you mentioned, how we can have this kind of, as Dr. Benji mentioned, that how we can promote a culture within the university where teachers or others would be willing to open-minded or learn about other cultures. So related to Dr. Pamela's presentation, which she highlighted, culture blend. I think this is one of the good opportunity for teachers to have mentees from different cultural backgrounds, not only in relation to supporting in language learning, rather learning about their own cultures or cultural values and practices. For instance, one of the conceptions among the faculty and most of the facilitators of the canteen or somewhere else I have found, for instance, with respect to halal food, what they believe is if there is no pork in the food, it's halal. Non-pork items, the food item on the menu is halal. Though halal is a very different thing. And most of the time I see people thinking of Muslims, their needs, food needs, but ignore others as well. For instance, Muslims do not eat pork, but some people who follow the Hindu practice, they eat pork but do not eat beef. So these cultural sensitivities could be, make part of our learning, and we can learn these things from the students' perspective and their own experiences as well. So, like having mentees from other cultural backgrounds, or teachers should have that kind of mentee-mentor relationship in terms of in academic activities, but beyond that, those mentors can also learn about those cultures and those students' needs beyond their academic requirements or necessities at the campus.
Thank you. I'll just follow up on your issue about halal. I worked in Liverpool for a while, and one of my jobs was representing the needs of international students to the canteen committee. And one of the problems that arose was the breakfast served in the canteen was a set breakfast with no variation, and they included pork sausages. So I was asked to raise the point that this was not acceptable to Muslims. So I told the lady in charge of the catering, I said, please, we can't serve pork sausages to Muslims. She said, oh, I never realised that. She said, so Muslims don't eat pork. Oh, okay, I won't give them sausages, I'll give them bacon. Pamela.
Yeah. May I just respond to consider that?
Shahid.
Shahid. Thank you for your comment. I do agree that I've learned a lot from my mentee. In fact, because of this symposium, I asked him for help, and I started a conversation about, hey, Mohsin, since you were doing so well, I would really like to meet your mother one day. Because I do want her to know that her son is doing very well at school. And, then we go on some conversation. I'm interested in cooking. And I wonder if one day I can interview his mother and learn how they prepare the food and write out the story about them in Chinese. So what my point is, it would be very meaningful in terms of intercultural exchange, that we Chinese people can have more opportunities to understand the real life of people from different cultural backgrounds. This is one point. And then back to our working environment. I think for those students who come to me to seek help in Chinese language, I see the different needs. Some of them may need just some basic interpersonal competence. But if they mean to stay here, to stay in this Chinese community for long, some of them are looking for serious academic Chinese language, which at the moment I don't think our Chinese enhancement program are offering. In the long run, I think this is also an area worth investigating. What kind of Chinese language would, or perhaps multicultural students need after they enter the university? Are we developing some formal language support for them? If they say, if they want to get a job in the government to become a civil servant, I think it's important that they have that kind of language command. But they may not need to speak in the language, but if they come across some memo written in Chinese that they could not understand, that would be a disadvantage. So I think system-wide, perhaps we can think about what we can do in this area. Of my own knowledge, I don't think there is one at this moment specific Chinese enhancement program for multicultural students at the university or in other universities yet. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's not just social Chinese, there's also academic and professional domains where they perhaps find their own pathway, but we have to think about catering for that need and providing for it, supporting that. Thank you. Dr. Chin, have you got any thing you'd like to mention or share with us?
Okay. My name is Shin, and I thanks Pamela for introducing my website for self-study and Cantonese self-learning website. And if you have a chance, I came here to learn things. I'm not really familiar with minority education, but I just wanted to know the language needs and what kind of things could be done, incorporated in the future. So it was actually very useful to be here because I'm Japanese, so I'm also a kind of minority and part of minority groups. But now I live as a member of a majority group because I teach Chinese to students, local students, using Cantonese. So I might be a really special example of how changing your status from minority to majority. So this is something people in Hong Kong, English is always the dominant language, but maybe Cantonese or even Putonghua could be taken more seriously in order for minorities to get more acknowledged, and also for local and that's why I just created this Cantonese website. And what I could maybe Bob, you said we should discuss something we are doing well and something we are doing not enough and something we haven't done yet. I'm not sure whether, as an education university, we are sending so many student teachers to local primary schools and secondary schools. And as a Chinese teacher, I went to 3 schools which I found very interesting. One student was sent to a school in Puntong. The I just wonder whether the university has the figure of how many of the students would go through teaching experience of minority students. And I also went to Saigon, and I went to 2 schools where I saw so many mixed children. What I mean by mixed is that one of the parents are Chinese, but they might be Putonghua speakers. So when they in class they spoke Putonghua or English, and local students are also in the class. So it's a really strange mixture of languages talk going on in the Chinese class. And this student from our school responded to any language. I think he was so great. He did a very good job, because he sometimes switched to Cantonese and sometimes switched to Putonghua, and sometimes he even switched to English to cope with all the language problems in this Chinese class. But I think I haven't heard. Maybe I'm just ignorant. But I'm wondering whether this kind of situation is ever taken into account when we are doing this education research. And we're talking about what we can do on campus, but actually students go outside campus and experience all these things. So I think it's worth looking more about at their experiences. So yeah, I think that's all.
Great. Thank you very much for those points. And the issue about the number of TP students going into schools which are multicultural is going to become a bigger and bigger issue, I think, nowadays. There are actually more and more white people going into the local schools as well, because they can't afford the international schools and can't get places there. So that's another aspect which of diversity which we need to accommodate within the teacher development of our students. I'm conscious of the time, but we have opportunity for final contribution. Anybody, particularly those who haven't had a chance to speak yet, or like Tiki, who's
may I have this?
You can please do.
Actually, it's because I also heard about that outreaching activities is also one of our concern in this forum. So about this point, I think about this, because this is very important. Because all the time we are talking about how we are going to do well and what we are not doing so well in our university. But then I also think that for the harmonization of in a multicultural society, it's so important that we also have to reach out to more EM groups or EM community. And also this, because when I think about our mission of the program that I mentioned about the multicultural teaching assistance, because we make very great efforts to connect with secondary schools who have those schools who have non-Chinese speaking students. So we have difficulty in reaching out. So I think if in our university we have more connections with not just secondary schools, but beyond that, have connections with the mosque temples, EM community groups. It will be very a great contribution to send our messages. What we have, for example, the provision of such kinds of programs and also other programs, because I have heard that many faculties are developing different programs, are admitting non-Chinese speaking students into the programs. So I think it's important to reach out more.
Great.
So that's my final.
I think that's a very important message to finish with. And on that point, I'd like to wrap up by thanking everybody for coming today and for sharing your ideas. We're going to write up a report, and I suggest we'll share it with you in draft form by email. If we haven't represented your views strongly enough or incorrectly, do let us know. And if you have any supplemental ideas that you would like to put into the report, also please let us know. That'll be done mainly through Will Douglas. Now, Will, you've been in contact with Will through email. He sends his apologies. He's recovering from minor surgery, so we wish him well in his recovery. He should be back with us in the next week or so, but he's very sorry he couldn't make it today. And I'd like to thank Lena Dong for stepping in at very late notice and helping us out with the organisation. She's done a terrific job, and I'm very grateful to you, Lena, for helping. I'd also like to thank Mei Cheng, and I'd like to thank John Lee for allowing us access to this beautiful meeting room. It's a privilege to be here and sit in comfortable seats for a change. But above all, I'd like to thank all the speakers who came today and gave their presentations, and I'd like you for listening and participating and presenting your ideas. Thank you very much indeed.